We are talking in the majority of cases, Hans Christian, here, aren't we, of people who are aware of their illness before it degenerates to such a state that they can't make that decision alone. I mean, I think we're all familiar of a situation of where you are in a high dependency unit at a hospital following an accident which was unexpected, and the decision of whether to switch off a life support machine or not, which of course is an utterly separate issue. Here, though, we are talking about people who are cognitive, who can make that decision in plenty of time. Isn't it right that their loved ones should be protected in these kind of situations where you know what's going to happen? We were talking about the case of Debbie Purdy before. If it had have been, the situation is that she could not be here with us now, whereas now she has that flexibility and she has that peace of mind of knowing that.
The problem is, if you're faced with a situation like this, I work as a GP. I mean, I see, patients with terminal illnesses, I would say every week,
Yes.
And obviously you understand, the worry, the suffering, the pain, the fear that is there, and therefore I'm not, saying, it never should happen. I mean, but what I'm trying to say is I believe it just would send a very, very dangerous societal precedent once you legalize assisted suicide or assisted or euthanasia. And as we were saying before, hard cases make bad laws. Once you have a case like this, it will still, and you legalize euthanasia, it will still have societal implications. Just to pick up the point about Oregon, for example, once when in Oregon assisted suicide was legalized, only a minority of people agreed to to assisted suicide because they felt pressurized into it. But after some years, the majority, after some surveys done, showed that the majority of people actually felt that because they had become a burden to others, they had to agree to euthanasia. I know it's again a completely different subject, but I think the issue with abortion shows what happens once you legalize abortion. It becomes an option for every woman who finds herself pregnant. Once you legalize euthanasia and assisted suicide, it becomes an option for everyone who finds himself ill, not just terminally ill. Dr. Carol Gunning, a Dutch doctor, who said, once you find killing as a solution for one problem, tomorrow you find hundreds of problems for which killing is going to be the solution. Why not euthanasia for depression?
On directly on.
I really do.
Please do.
I really do. First of all, yes, I think the difficulty when we start looking at research is everybody who's pro-assisted suicide will do their research, everybody who is against assisted suicide will do their research.
A war of statistics.
Absolutely. If you actually go to the source of the information, and every year Oregon has to produce a report on how many people have accessed their Dying with Dignity Act, which is how it's referred to, 97% of people give as their reason erosion of their autonomy. Not because they feel a burden, not because they're in intractable pain, but because they fear that they are losing control over their own lives and they don't want that to happen. So it's important for them to have that choice and exercise that self-determination.
What about the comparison to abortion?
Well, my concerns with the comparison to abortion is, once again, we have a vocal minority attempting to set laws for a group of people whose experience they will never understand because they will never experience it. And really, that does not seem appropriate in a democratic and civilized society. We should be allowing, if people have the choice, you can choose to go down that route, you can choose not to go down that route. If we say people have no choice, then that's the end of the argument. And if you actually look at the reports that come out of Oregon, they turn people away. People who go to them who clearly have got psychiatric disorders or are mentally unstable, they say no. Whereas with legislation we can protect those people. Without legislation, we don't know what will happen.
Many people in desperate situations at the moment are, quotes, suffering in silence and watching with interest, I'm sure, the developments. Are we not looking here at a situation where we might have people ending their lives early because of that fear that Carol speaks of, that loss of autonomy?
Well, I mean, obviously everybody knows about people who go to these, to Dignitas Clinic in Switzerland,
Yes.
yeah, and and it's a very difficult one. I mean, I feel desperately sorry for somebody who feels that they have no other no other choice.
But again, their
that,
relatives do still run the risk in this country of facing prosecution, even for being on the plane going to Switzerland with them.
Yes. On the other hand, there's also been at least, I think at least one case of a couple that went to Switzerland and the relatives didn't know anything about him, and then they died, and then the relatives were completely shocked. What I'm trying to say here is also while obviously everybody understands this issue about individual choice and individual autonomy, nobody's an island, Again, I apologize for that. It's perhaps slightly harsh, comparison, but what about my individual choice of taking drugs, It always has implications on others, I might end up driving under the influence of drugs, I might be, involved in criminality, whatever. It might have an adverse effect on others around me. Euthanasia has adverse effects on others, because people will, once you have somebody who, your relative who says they want to die and they will die, this has a very adverse effect on the family,
Let's, if I may, for a second, just move things on just slightly and talk about Sir Terry Pratchett's proposal for a living tribunal case, if you like, where each, I take it that the idea here is that the individual circumstances are dealt with in an independent tribunal, and a decision is then made on those individual basis. Would you be more in support of that, Hans Christian?
The thing that I find very interesting about this whole debate is that it is said that to legalize assisted suicide or euthanasia is about patient autonomy. But once you have assisted suicide, you actually have either a doctor, for example in Holland or in Oregon, or you have a panel that decides whether or not you can live or you can die. So in other words, actually, I think it actually takes away autonomy from the patient.
Right.
So I think it actually even increases the power that doctors have over their patients. So I'd be actually quite concerned about something like this.
Carol, was Sir Terry naive then in that viewpoint?
I don't think he's naive, and if I think that we ever had legislation on assisted dying in this country, I would like to see something along the Oregon model, and what he described was very similar to it. In Oregon, you have to be seen by a consultant physician. You can be seen by a consultant palliative care physician. If necessary, a lawyer will be brought in. And really, you can't have it both ways. We can't say it's a slippery slope and people will just take this option up willy-nilly, and then say, but if we put steps in to protect those people and make sure they're fully informed and that their choice is fully informed, that's wrong as well. I think the notion of a panel, which sort of has implications of a yes or no decision, is slightly naive. But I fully support the fact that anybody who wants to make this decision gets as much information about it as they can. And I think this is the point. People don't just wake up one day and go, that's it. In Oregon, you have to have expressed this desire on at least 2 occasions, at least 15 days apart, also in writing. This is a carefully considered option for people. This is not something people just walk in off the street for. I mean, was it Martin Amis who was assessing suicide booths on the street? That's not the sort of situation we're going down. It's about thinking things through carefully and deciding how you want to deal with this. And again, when you look at the data from Oregon, which is fairly comprehensive, there is quite a range between people having this conversation and actually doing the deed, if you like. The average is about 6 weeks, but the longest case is over 1,000 days. So this is something people would like to have the option, like to know that it's there, so that they can enjoy what they've got left.
That seems to be the key here, doesn't it? It seems to be the person who has the illness, the affliction, whatever it may be, isn't it really about reassuring them? This is almost specifically for those cases, isn't it? For people who have terminal illnesses, people that know there is a definitive end.
Well, before I answer, perhaps one comment about, I mean, and maybe you can correct me here. I'm not aware of data from Oregon, but I know that there's been some analysis of data from Holland, and the assisted suicide is not always the good death people had hoped for. You know, sometimes people now do not die as quickly as they as they are, you know, as wanted, and sometimes they might take up to 7 days to die. So it's not, you know, the thing is about this sort of youth that you know, with this good death with assisted suicide, you know, it's not that simple really. It's not that simple, and I still think that we're devaluing life once we go down that route. You know, that would be my concern.
Okay, we have to leave it there for now. We'll come back in part 2. Another guest joins us, Mustafa Raza Khan Beg joins us, and we'll start talking about the religious aspects to this as well. A lot of religions are against assisted suicide and euthanasia, and we'll come back and explore that in part 2 of Spotlight.